So I'm going to talk to you today about essentially our Happy Signals experience. So we've gone from assumption to evidence, and I did not know we would be in this wonderful place. I kind of feel like this is the Happy Signals Hollywood blockbuster that's about to appear, and Tom Cruise is going to come through here. But no, nothing as exciting as that. We're just Invesco, we're at asset funds, we deal with money, and it's just to talk about our experience over the last 6 years. So, as I mentioned, and as Katie kindly mentioned, we've been with Happy Signals since 2019. And I guess the key part for us is in that time, we've received approximately 250,000 responses. So we have got a lot of data to, just to look at, to deal with, to come up with processes. So I'm really happy to share all of that, our learnings with you today. And essentially what this data has done and these responses is it's enabled us to transform how we in our customer experience team and also the wider technology team view feedback. And it's built into this culture of continual improvement, which in its turn drives improving our employees' technology experience. Okay, so just before we dive into the Happy Signal stuff, just a little bit of background about us. So I guess similar to what Sharon said about GEA, you might not have heard about Invesco, but investing is essentially what we do. We're a global asset management firm. As of the end of April, we had 1.8 billion assets under management. We have about 8,500 employees. We're in 20 plus countries and we have 11 different investment centres. So essentially what that does is it gives us a global presence, and to back up or being present in all those countries, we've got an IT presence in there. When I say an IT presence, for a lot of those bigger sort of sites, we'll have like a local tech team. And that kind of leads into some of the data that we're going to see later. So a little bit about me. Why am I up here today? So I've got over 30 years experience in technology. Okay, you can all say, you don't look like you have, Sharon. Thanks. I've grown up, in tech operations, support, project management, leadership, and now I'm on the other side of that now, using data and insight to improve our customers' overall tech experience. So this might be through process, technology, or sometimes it's just, having that empathetic ear to lead to it. Also, I lead within our Voice of the Customer group, and I'm our Happy Signals product owner. Okay, so let's go back a little bit in early history, back to 2019, when we first went live with Happy Signals. So our problem statement at that point, I will pause here and say we are a service now, and our technology is all in-house. So in 2019, we were running with ServiceNow. We had a sort of a rudimentary customer feedback tool. So at the end of a ticket, so a ServiceNow request or an incident, you were asked to give a thumbs up or a thumbs down on your experience. And what we saw with that was there was about a 3% response rate. There was no option to give any additional feedback. I will say there was minimal or probably no action actually being done with those responses, whether they were even looked at. And we kind of felt that we were missing out on a wealth of feedback experience. There was also a leadership perception going on as well at that point. So bringing up the watermelon there, we were meeting all our SLAs and we were showcasing really well how our technology targets were being met. However, there was nothing to prove dissatisfaction to our senior leadership. There was also perception within our senior leadership within technology that there was a black hole, that you'd raised an incident or something and it just went off into a black hole and wasn't dealt with. This was probably anecdotal conversations around a water cooler, but our CTO at that point said, the experience that we're providing wasn't great. There was also a desire to bring in some standardised overall satisfaction tools, so that we were looking at an in-house developed NPS tool to bring in. So at that point, and it is 6 years ago actually, to last week, we came across Happy Signals at the SIT show here in London. I will say that it was very quick to bring this online. So from May, we met them, and then by late October, we'd gone live. So we started off quite tentatively. We initially went live with just our UK team, then we pushed it out to EMEA, and then by December, we were brought all of our regions online. And at that point, we went live with all our incidents, all our requests and our enhancements within ServiceNow. So what that means, if you're not a customer, is when an incident or request is closed, you get an email, you get a prompt to ask for your experience. And that's what you're seeing there in the bottom with the email. That's actually an example of what we send out. So I guess what we're measuring now. So as I said, initially it was every incident or request. And then in March 2020, we all know what happened. Went into the global pandemic, and Happy Signals enabled the remote access experience. So that's one of their proactive surveys. So what that did was, at the end of the other surveys, you were asked about your remote access experience. So that continued. And then 2 years later, in May 22, began to expand to the model that we see now at Invesco. So what we have there is we've gone live with all but one of the proactive surveys. We've kind of tweaked and refined our frequency of sending out surveys. We've also changed some of the wording in the emails. We've changed the colouring on the 0 to 10 also. And then just last month, we collaborated with another team within Invesco, so with HR, and we've turned on the service portal survey. So now we're asking our employees, whenever they go into the service portal, what their experience like that is. Okay, so here's our sort of data and our numbers slide. So this was at the start of May, we'd received approximately 230,000 responses. So that's across both events and also across our proactive surveys and the service portal. We kind of average around 160 responses per day. Now, if we were to take that out and just go with the standard event stuff, so the instance and requests, we'll probably see about between 250 and 270 responses per day. Out of those 230,000, we've had 160,000 factors selected. So that's, service personnel was good, and whether you can get those options to do that. And then we've also had individual feedback comments in nearly 25,000. So that's when we get free-form text telling us about the experience. And then the graph that you're seeing there, that's from when we went live. This is our services, so our incidents and requests. So you can see it starts off going live just in EMEA, red, it wasn't hitting our target, but there's sort of been a gradual increase across the 6 years. And we with a trend upward. And we're pleased to say that our incidents average at plus 92. Similar to what Sharon said, our service desk averages at plus 96. So we kind of feel like we've reached a ceiling with our sort of incidents and request management. And there's some opportunities in the proactive surveys. And you can't really see it in this, but last year, when it's good to call out, when CrowdStrike happened, we were someone who was affected by that. And we had a big spike in our responses, not negatively, just to say what a good job technology was doing. So that was good to show back to management as well. I'd also like to call out the fact that we score consistently higher than Happy Signals benchmark data. And thinking about that, there's probably a few reasons behind that. As I've mentioned, our tech's in-house, so our service desk is in-house. Also, all our major sites have got a presence of technology. So it's kind of like we're giving feedback to a face. So there's that sort of human piece. And actually, as Zachary just sort of called out to me, we're a small shop, actually. We're 8,500. We're not a big shop. So they've seen like that's where we get higher satisfaction there as well. Okay. There we go. So some of the ways that we've used the data we've gathered. So our black hole perception's now been eradicated. We've got data to back up what we're seeing. These tickets and incidents don't disappear. They're looked after and they're managed throughout their life cycle. We've also set up a process where every negative response is acknowledged. Then there's an analysis done to identify what was the root cause behind that bad experience. And then we've got a remediation process taken where that's needed. And the hope is there we turn our detractors into promoters. We share our scores quite openly, and we have what's a fortnightly ceremony that celebrates this positive feedback. So we've gone through different scenarios around that. So we've created videos where we call out, people that have received positive feedback. There's a feature within Happy Signals where you can look at the feedback and you can filter it on mentions, so where we see names around that. For example, we're here in the UK. We've got a guy in Taiwan that they absolutely love. crashing into this, called Thomas. He gets about 15 every fortnight. So, this is something that we wouldn't have been aware of without Happy Signals. We also now we send out a fortnightly newsletter that details this. So any issues, as I mentioned, that are identified now feed into our continuous improvement register, and they also become topics for a new initiative that we've got, which is around mystery shopping. So what this does is we pick out something that's had a negative score, and we select some of our business partners, and they go off and they do whatever that procedure or request is and feed back to us what that is. So that's where we say there that the analysis of the data allows us to look at a multitude of angles for further improvement opportunities. So that's why we've came up with the mystery shopper initiative. Also, our laptops and computer survey, I'd like to really call that one out. We've gone, thank you. So we were one of the insights that came out of that was something that we hadn't really considered, was that the laptops were too heavy. So our laptops are chosen by an engineering team based in the US. They probably drive into the office, and the men. So this, the survey we were getting back for people that predominantly use public transport, whether it's in Asia or in Europe, in New York, that the laptops were too heavy. So we've fed that back now into the engineering team. Okay. So this, quite a detailed slide, but this is a process that we've came up with to drive our continuous improvement. I'm not going to go through it all, but just highlight it really, that, it's just to show that the continuous cycle around our feedback loop. So we have sort of at the top of it that the instant request is closed, or we send out a proactive survey, and that triggers the survey to be sent out. And at that point, we're going to get a response back. Our CX site lead, so our customer experience team leader for a geographical site, will review any of the scores between 0 and 6, and perhaps look at the comments around 7 and plus. And if there's a negative sentiment exists, we further look into the service now ticket to see what happened. We also, at that point, contact the BP, the business partner, our customer, to say that we acknowledge their feedback. And if they've selected one of the factors where the ticket was not resolved, what we do then is reopen the ticket and we escalate it. The CX site lead will do a detailed review of what happened during that event, and then the results of that investigation are actually notated. If they make a determination around whether it's people, process, or technology, and if it's people, we use that as an opportunity for coaching, or whether it's team-wide training. At that point, it gets added to the continuous improvement register that we've created, and there's a team there that looks at that to prioritise what we would do with that. So these are assessed and prioritised based on their impact to the overall experience. Then the improvements completed, and story and success are then shared with the business partner, and then the cycle begins there again. All right. Okay, so I guess, upon reflection, looking at what we've learned, so there's the new insights that we've gained, our customers, our business partners, I guess this was one that's come back, and our teams like this, is that they actually really like us. We're getting good scores. They like the service that we provide, especially when they have an event. So when something's broken, they can call out to tech, and they're happy with the service that technology provides. We're completely transparent with the dashboard. We share the single sign-on. We encourage people within tech and our senior stakeholders to go in and to review the data that's there. Sometimes they don't actually know what they're looking at, so they need some pointers, but it's there for all to view. Also, our analyst perspective, they like the fact that it's in real time. They can see how they're performing. Some of them have widgets set up in service now, so they can see the scores coming in. Maybe there's, competitions around who's going to get the most mentions, etc. So that's been a real positive for the teams. We're also big proponents of listening, acting, and sharing. So, as I've mentioned, we have a process in place to ensure that we do respond to the feedback, and it's a must. And we've seen scores improve because of this. And we've also seen insights gained that we wouldn't have before. We also make sure that we share our stories, and bring to life the importance of giving feedback and what we do with that. We also create a quarterly report out that we share to everyone as well. And I guess one of the key things also that we've learnt there is around to be brave. So he's not here today, but Ilka Malva, back in 2019, we were so tentative about should we go live or not? How much should we do? And he just said, just go faster, be brave. And he was right. It really, as soon as we've enabled more things, and you just see the feedback coming in. You turn it on and you just sit there and wait for that first piece of feedback to come in. And I think Sharon had mentioned, like, people were scared, am I going to get a lot of negative feedback? But out of those nearly 250,000 responses, we've probably had an individual name called out less than 10 times. Okay. So looking forward for us here at Invesco, what's next? So we're going to continue our further collaboration with Happy Signals. We've been a successful partnership to date. We've got a lot of learnings within our metrics that continue. So whether this is from traditional or using the AI, I mentioned the quarterly reports. We use the AI that they've embedded to bring an analysis of the feedback, which is, having been in it from the start, is really helpful. We used to go through, pull out the data, try and parse it yourself. It's just decreased this in time to do that greatly. We constantly are reviewing and changing our targets where necessary. I mentioned that we've probably peaked out at with our service delivery, but there's stuff around our mobile devices, our laptops, where we can increase. So we kind of set ourselves quite aggressive targets to meet on that. We're going to continue to share our success stories and change perhaps how we do some of that. That's always popular. And then we found by doing that as well, it increases the response rate. So we've actually seen, it's worth noting, you start off strong and you're worried what's your response rate going to be like. But for our incidents, it's pretty consistent around 20%. For our laptops and mobile device surveys, they're really popular. They're pretty high, around 30%. And some of the others teeter between 15 and 10%. But, by sharing those success stories, it kind of reminds people of we're going to ask you, we use this feedback, we don't just ignore it. It's actually quite a funny story in regards to our global head of infrastructure. He was asked about his laptop. Anyway, I was reviewing the data, and there's this massive, this is my laptop, it's the best laptop, everyone should have this laptop. And I was like, what is he doing? So he'd actually put into AI, can you respond to this survey as if I'm Donald Trump? So at least he knows we review the feedback, right? So we've got one more survey that we want to enable, and that's the enterprise app surveys. So we're being a little bit, not mindful, but just wanting to find a good case, a good candidate within Invesco to do that. And why I'm hesitant is we're going through quite a major transformation on our investment side, application side. So it's probably not the tool to ask about. So maybe around something else, we're going to do that. We have also enabled additional questions. So that's something that you can ask. After someone's completed a survey, you might have a question that you want to ask. So currently we're asking about, if you've had a new laptop, what do you like about it? Somebody who was doing that on the engineering side was sending out, I'll say it, don't listen, Sammy, a Microsoft Forms survey. So we pulled that in now. So we're getting that captured in Happy Signals. Another recent initiative that we've turned on is internal hug meetups. So we're using the data that we get from Happy Signals to shape what they're like. So we use that, whether we're going to ask about Service Portal in the next hug that we have. So if we're seeing something that's trending down or up, we use that data to come in to have a discussion. And we have those set up regionally, so we're capturing sort of all the cultural or geographical nuances. Okay, so that is me. I did allow time for questions. I don't know if there are any, Katie, but...
So Sharon, we do have 3 questions for
Okay.
you that have come in, please, if you don't mind. How many resources are needed to analyse those negative experiences to take remedial action?
Okay, so what we we split our groups into 3 regions. So obviously we've got EMEA, NA, and Asia Pac. But and so we have like sort of 3 operational meetings weekly. So we have somebody within those teams that's looked on that. But our site leads, I would say we've probably got, I'm just trying to think, probably about 10. About 10. We don't get a lot of negative feedback weekly, but we get enough to pinpoint and to look at. So, and what we've also done is we've set up a process within ServiceNow. So we have a form within ServiceNow that you can fill out. When you fill out that feedback, we also have an alert set up. So when a negative feedback comes in, you can you get alerted to that, to have a look and to review into that. And then backing up to what those weekly operational meetings do is we review that feedback in there and feed it into the CIR. Yeah.
And I'm going to probably extend on that one, actually, just before I ask the second question that came in. But in terms of those 10 resources, are they new resources that you've had to recruit?
No. We've just sort of added it on to what was it's the people that historically we would have called desktop support, but they're going out. We've added them in there. They're the people that, why we have it, I guess, to a site lead is they're the people that know the customers at that site. So they'll go and speak to them. So they've already hopefully got that personal relationship. You've given us this. And a lot of time it's like, oh, sorry, I didn't mean that, like there's a person on the end of it. Or it could be an actual genuine concern that gives us an opportunity to improve.
Fantastic. So second question, what proportion of those actions are quick wins and strategic?
Okay, so let me have a think about that one. Well, if you take an example with a laptop, that's not necessarily a quick win because we've got to go out and have a look, decide which model we're going to go with. It depends whether it's an individual experience. So if somebody's specifically had a bad experience maybe with an individual, or maybe they've had a bad experience with a device. So what we're seeing as well with the proactive surveys is that when you ask for someone for feedback on that, it might have been a niggle or an annoyance that they might not have put an incident or a request in, but it's like, okay, you've asked me, and you just get the whole sort of agony aunt slew, which is fine. You go and you deal with that, and that's also strategic ones, probably 20%, I'd say. Yeah.
Fantastic. And how is the Happy Signals data used to influence decisions that may be outside the responsibility of IT?
Yes, well, I would say that we're just starting on that journey with, working with, HR. We perhaps our security team, like maybe historically that would have sat within technology. So they do get a lot of negative feedback, I would admit, compared to the rest of tech. And so we share the data with them. We share this is what's being said. And hopefully some of them will take it on board. Some of them listen and then, I'm sure they just took it away. But that's that. But with HR now, who are partnering around the service portal, which we use, we're in hypercare with them currently, and they're actioning, taking on board a lot of the feedback around the HR portal that's coming in. They're making changes to that, wanting to set up, looking at how we can sort of encourage that. So I guess it's a bit of watch this space. Yeah.
Okay. We've got 5 minutes. I'm just wondering, Sharon, if you're up for it, would you be all right to come up with a microphone? Because there's a couple of questions that I think we could open up to both of you as well that have come through, if that's all right.
Yeah.
So Sharon, you mentioned about some great scores, particularly through your MSP, and Sharon, you've also mentioned that your scores are way up there as well in terms of the 90 plus. So one of the questions is, how did you achieve 90 plus baseline for tickets?
Was that me or was that you?
Well, I think you both have. To both of you.
I mean,
you're in the school.
If I jump in, I would say with our 90 plus, we just enabled it to see what we would get, and that's what we were coming out at. So, yeah.
Was it a 90% plus on
90 plus score on tickets?
Yeah, I will say we're lower on requests. Our incidents. So when something's broke and we fix it, people are really happy. We do a really good job. When they request something, there's certain CIs or certain requests that can sometimes fall down a bit, yeah.
I agree with you. We have the same problem with requests.
Can you tell my husband then? I agree with you.
Yeah, I'm done. Agreed. One thing I think that helps with that improvement, I'm going to mention the service desk again. Our service desk are closing something on average around 70% of tickets in one day, incidents. And that's what's making the difference, I think.
Okay, so from a salesperson, I know what I would answer to this if a prospect asked me the question. So I'm quite keen now to see whether or not I've got it right or not. So if you're continually getting high scores, doesn't that become a problem at some point? And when does it become difficult to get improvement ideas? And it might sound weird, I'm reading exactly as it is, it might sound weird, but how do you encourage negative feedback?
Encourage negative.
So although we get continued high scores, we still get negatives. And then, I think it's, going back to school with the mean graph, like the bell curve. So if you can focus on that bit in the middle, but it's when you look at the extremes that you get the real sort of data nuggets to go in and look at. So when we might not get that many, so that's why we can probably go into them, but we'll look at that and see what the problem is. And actually, it's almost like a bit like a canary in the mine. So one person might be saying this and you find out, well, actually, this is a bigger issue for more people. It's just we've hit that person who's willing to give us feedback. And what was the other bit about how to encourage to give negative?
How do you encourage negative feedback? Make it all bad?
Yeah. I mean, people are going to just give you feedback as well. Yeah. I mean, sometimes you can see when somebody's really emotional, really angry as well. And you kind of have to tease that away and then go in and after the data.
I mean, we encourage any feedback. The thing with negative feedback is that let's look at it differently. In happy signals, you have your negative, your poor experience. You have your the neutral, and you have your good experience. The golden nuggets are the neutrals. Some of those people who are giving negative experience, I can tell you, I think you see the same. Some of it's a personal thing. They can never make some of these people happy, but those I don't focus on the negatives. Look at the neutral, the people who can decide if they're happy or sad or whatever. They're the ones who will change things around for you. And if you focus on them, I think that could be a game changer.
I will say as well, we also have drifted into a bit of policy around when we ask about office environments. So how many days are you being forced to come in the office versus not? And, we share that in the quarterly report, but that's not influenced anything, I will be honest. It's still
and I think, if I take some of the conversations that we had with other customers as well, in terms of who are constantly performing at high scores, you can't take it for granted that you're constantly performing at high scores. Anything can happen at any one point in time, which can completely turn that the other way. So I think it's measuring it, but also for some organizations, they're looking at it to say, we need to be more innovative. We mentioned earlier about the different generations that are coming into the organization. Their needs are different. So you've got to continuously be measuring the experiences across the whole of the organization and all of the different generations and all of the influences that are happening in order to make sure that you can maintain it, but also continue to improve as time goes on.
I guess as well, we're looking at it as a more holistic picture now as well. So although we've got the surveys, which are one point in time, and you could catch someone on a bad day or a good day or whatever, but we tailor that now with hugs. So we're going out and we're speaking to people so that, you're getting the survey feedback and then you're getting the actual conversations. So whether that backs it up or whether that's going to deny what you're hearing. So it's probably looking at those two approaches helps around the feedback. So you probably get more, not negative, but people are probably going to be more honest, face to face,
You mentioned something about I mentioned it on my slide. Keeping up the momentum is a challenge when you're performing well. That's why I say, if you're performing well, try to look at those neutrals. You were saying, how do you keep that momentum? And of course, if you're using happy signals, you have a customer success manager. Ask them for some help.